The history books talk a lot about Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal in the Depression in the 1930s. Not so well known is Theodore Roosevelt's earlier Square Deal, or years later what Harry S. Truman called the Fair Deal. But the fact is, whenever the ruling class shuffles the cards, the working class and oppressed are sure to wind up with a raw deal. You can take that to the bank. Somehow the 1% gets all the aces, and the rest of us, the 99%, get the 2s, 3s, and 4s. We study history to apply the lessons of the past to the struggles of today. The basic tenets of Marxism were paid for by the blood of working class martyrs, and we honor them by remembering the lessons that they can teach. This report will focus on some popular misconceptions of the New Deal and how gains are really won by the working class. The capitalist media is trying to create a political tidal wave about the upcoming primaries and elections. Their message to Occupy Wall Street and the working class movement is that however righteous the movement was, it is now over, and the grown-up thing to do now is to vote. According to the ruling class stooges in the media, this is how change really happens. That the important thing to do is to be peaceful and legal and vote. This is totally false and always has been. So many things used to be illegal. 150 years ago, it was illegal for African American slaves to escape, and illegal for anyone to help them. It used to be illegal for non-property owners to vote, or for women to vote, or for workers to form a union, or to strike. It is still illegal in most places for lesbian, gay, and trans people to marry, and the struggle goes on. Never have any concessions been won by the vote only. The only thing that made what was formerly illegal legal was the class struggle, in all its many forms and on many levels. The history books call the 1920s the Roaring Twenties, the so-called golden age in U.S. history, but the gold only roared to the top. The 1% celebrates this age of virulent racism, anti-unionism, and witch hunts of immigrants. Productivity surged in the 1920s, but one-tenth of 1% of the population had a total income more than the bottom 42%. Only a small percentage of the working class even worked a 5-hour week. The average work week was 55 hours in iron and steel, 54 in textiles, and 60 hours a week for the average laborer. Yet, as today, about half the population was poor. It was worse for immigrants, mostly from East Europe at the time, and even worse for African American families. In this period, the wages of African Americans was about 1/2 that of the already low wages of white workers. Jim Crow discrimination was the law of the land in the South, and open discrimination was rampant in the North. The Ku Klux Klan had over 4 million members. Lynching and other terrorist acts in the South were not uncommon and generally ignored by every level of government. The KKK also violently opposed immigration and union organizing, serving as company spies, thugs, and assassins of union organizers. In this period, strike after strike was lost. However, nationally, the working class was no longer completely segregated. 500,000 African Americans had moved north during and after World War I. By 1930, more than 25% of African American men were employed in industrial jobs, compared with only 7% in 1890. By the mid-1930s, African American workers made up 20% of laborers, 6% of the workers in steel industry, and 1/5 of the workforce in Chicago slaughterhouses were African American. This was the situation for the working class when the stock market crashed in 1929, and things got even worse. $25 billion of stock value vanished overnight. Over 5,000 banks failed. Official unemployment soared from 3% to 25%. In response to the crisis, the owners cut wages by 45% on average. Many unemployed men left their families, so the meager relief rations would stretch further. Poor families from the Midwest migrated to California to work in the fields. while thousands of Mexican workers were deported en masse. The response of the Hoover administration was to appoint committees and commissions to study the problem. They concluded it was the employers who needed help. So the Reconstruction Finance Corporation was begun to finance building projects such as the Hoover Dam. But these projects were only drops in the bucket. The American Federation of Labor at the time did not oppose wage cuts, opposed unemployment insurance, practiced Jim Crow segregation, and joined Hoover in telling workers that prosperity is just around the corner. But working class resistance was only beginning. With hunger marches, demonstrations against unemployment and against evictions. The first national demonstrations against unemployment were called by the Trade Union Unity League in 1932. 100,000 packed Union Square in New York. Demonstrations also took place in Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, San Francisco, and other cities. Everywhere the marches were red-baited, and hundreds were arrested and beaten. But the movement strengthened. The National Unemployed Council was founded in Chicago in 1930. Through patient, conscious organizing, it built branches in 46 states and in cities and towns everywhere. They organized hunger marches and mass mobilizations in the streets and demanded jobs through public works, unemployment insurance, as well as food and shelter, and the elimination of racist discrimination. One of the most important organizing efforts of the Unemployed Council was the struggles against evictions. When a family faced eviction, the local council would mobilize its forces and the surrounding neighborhood to keep the family in the house. And these tactics prevented the eviction of thousands. They also conducted penny auctions, where one person would bid 1 penny for the property, and the community assuring that no one broke solidarity and bid more. And the house would be given back to the original owners. That's something. Now, the Communist Party of the 1930s played a leading role in initiating these struggles, and their record of fighting racism and promoting class solidarity was a crucial prelude to the struggles to come. Now, the role of the left in winning social justice, or a measure of social justice, in this country is practically ignored. There were many other socialist organizations that played pivotal roles in the struggle. Now, the CP initiated an aggressive defense of the case of the Scottsboro brothers. 9 African-American men convicted by a Jim Crow jury and a totally rigged injustice system in Alabama and sentenced to death in 1931. The CP vigorously opposed racism in its ranks and in every organizing effort and in unions, defense committees, and cultural events. The CP made the case of the Scottsboro brothers a national and international cause. The Soviet Union, which had the prestige of rapid industrialization through its 5-year plans at a time when the West was in economic decline, gave the case support, as well as its allied parties. For example, this was a surprise. There was a large demonstration in support of the Scottsboro brothers in Berlin, Germany, by the Communist Party of Germany, 2 years before the Nazi takeover. That's something. Yeah. When the election of 1932 came, the Democrat Franklin Roosevelt was elected in a landslide. So great was the hatred for Herbert Hoover that Roosevelt was seen as a savior to many, despite his relatively conservative budget-balancing platform. The New Deal promised to U.S. workers was very high on theater, but very low on performance. The early programs of the New Deal were in response to the capitalist economic crisis. Laws intended to reassure Wall Street that things were under control. Laws regulating banking, laws to balance the budget, and regulatory agencies such as the Securities Exchange Commission to harness speculation. These laws were intended to regulate profit-making and prevent another depression. Of course, today, the super rich want everything, and they don't want any regulation either. There was limited unemployment relief, such as the Civilian Conservation Corps, that employed youth at a very low wage. Most of that wage was sent directly to the families of the young workers. Such was the desperation of the times.